Nobody would be able to react, of course, if I wasn't there in the flesh. I could make use of the cars that had been totaled in pile-ups. The apocalypse had started pretty unexpectedly, and the drivers had lost control in a second, so there was absolute chaos on the streets. A large number of terrible accidents, with bodies mangled and torn. And you could find corpses in the cars themselves, or zombies trapped inside of the metal. And right here in the yard was a great little place. The playground with a fairly raised area. I could climb up to the very top and beat back anyone who tried to get to me in relative safety. The mound itself was made of wood, which was just perfect for me right now. Thankfully, there was nobody on the top. I materialized and smacked the highest step with all my strength. It cracked, but didn't break. But it did attract the attention of the deadies. One hit, another. I could break the next one, too. While I was dealing with the steps, the zombies were slowly starting to come up from both sides. One side was a gentle slope, while the other had the remaining steps. I could only calm down once I had broken the third one. Now my rear was well protected. The deadies couldn't jump. I mean, they can't, right? Now there was a crush starting on the mound. The zombies were being drawn in from all over the yard, scrabbling with all their strength and jostling against each other. Bow, normally. 300 over 300. Huh. Why hadn't I thought of that before? Probably because it wasn't a weapon, but just bullshit. But it couldn't hurt to do some training. It might even come in handy. There were 20 arrows, but I could get more later. I have nothing to say about the quality since I didn't even figure it out. But the pointed ends were sharp, so they should easily pierce through a skull. Thwunk! The first shot went wide, or rather, into the chest of the nearest monster. It was too soon to expect precision aiming, but in a pile like this you would definitely hit at least something. The next shot was true, since the deadie had managed to crawl up pretty close. I could have reached him with my sword even, but it would have taken too long to switch weapons. The arrows started shooting one after another. Most of them missed, but I still laid out 5 deadies. The worst thing was that there were minors among the zombies. Children. They couldn't avoid this fate either. And although the regular dead were just faceless to me, a gray mass, it was different with the kids. I felt bad for them. But it was paramount to remember that they had turned into monsters. There was no cure for them, and you just had to come to terms with that. The sword came down on his head with a sickening sound, splitting his skull in half. The zombie fell backwards, sliding down the hill and taking his comrades with him. That gave me time to turn around. No worries, nobody could get up the stairs. Another hit. And one more zombie goes down. Behind me, everything was still all clear. "Where are you going?" I asked one of the big ones, a really big one. And he was still coming. The plotter decided to try to get to me too, and, tossing aside his smaller companions, climbed up toward me. Swack! The sword bounced off of solid bone, causing no damage to the zombie. The next hit was useless as well. The thick bone just couldn't be cut like that. I had to switch to the extremities. His powerful hands were dragging along the wooden slope, and his nails were leaving deep scratches in it. The weapon smashed into his shoulder, and the beast suddenly jerked it toward himself right then. "You weren't expecting that, were you, prick?" I shouted, grabbing another sword from my inventory. My previous one had been thrown aside, but that was just for now. I only had to deal with this animal first. The beast was almost here, and having waited for the right moment, I started hacking at his neck like a butcher. 1 hit, 2, and 3. Here came the sound I was used to now. The spine. Gathering all my strength, I continued on my task. Hit again, and again. Level up +1. I only stopped when his massive bulk slid downward, and his head thudded to a stop below my feet. Was he dead? Definitely. I had gotten a level, after all, and a little green book had shown up below. I thought about finding more of the turned like that in the streets, taking them all out with a single precision strike. But I didn't have enough power for that yet. Foosh! I instinctively activated my class skill. But before I did that, I felt something touching my hair. A thorn, made of bone. It almost got me in the head, and was now stuck a few inches into the wooden wall behind me. Was it someone's ability? No, I couldn't see any people around. Just this bellowing herd. There was a good number of deadies around. It had been a fair amount of time since the beginning of the apocalypse, and now the streets were full of them. And the noise was attracting a bunch of zombies here, too. Having estimated the trajectory, I headed deep into their midst, looking for the new beast. And he was not hiding. As soon as I faded from view, the shooter immediately turned around and went about his own business. He looked visibly different from the rest of them, and that was because he had a new organ which created thorns and shot them in front of him. There was some sort of growth around his neck, with a short tube sticking out of it. It was that tube that shot bones wherever its owner wanted. He was a bit shorter than a regular zombie, and his physique also left something to be desired. This was caused by his slouching. Apparently, he needed to lean over to shoot. How he managed to aim was anyone's guess. So what should I do with him? No idea. There was a ton of deadies around me, all standing pretty densely together and with no intention of dispersing. Realizing that their prey had disappeared, they headed back out to the street in a harmonious mass. I did want to kill the beast, though. He was strong, which meant his rewards would be substantial. But there was no way I could just appear and hit him with my sword. The deadies around me might be able to react and bite me in that time. But was I not a ghost? I had to use that to its full potential. And my increased inventory, too. On top of that, I had 2 swords and a staff. I just had to hope everything would turn out how I thought it would. I flew up about 15 feet, took aim, and got a sword out of my inventory. It appeared in my hand, but in a dematerialized state. Thanks to the system, all system items appeared like that when I was a ghost. But that was no problem. I just went a little higher, took a sword in each hand, aimed again, and turned off my ability. All of my insides were suddenly gripped with the feeling of freefall. But that didn't last long. I threw my weapons down almost right away and turned my skill back on. Phew, I sighed, somewhere inside my own mind, with relief. And even though the swords missed, not hitting their targets at all, it was just a matter of time before I worked out a good method. For the next 20 minutes or so, I flew above my victim like a hawk, constantly dropping swords onto my enemies. Once one of them hit, but not in the head. The sword pierced his shoulder and crumbled into dust. It had worked so hard, and had finally reached the end of its durability. The second sword was just barely holding on, so I headed back to the children's playground. I dug some arrows out of the corpses there. There were about 15 of them. The rest had disappeared God knows where. Simple arrow, 530. Now I got it. They were just breaking up against the deadies. Where could I get more of them? It made sense to be from the rewards. They might even come in handy, so I should make a stockpile. Even though I might be a little short-sighted, I still might be able to use this shitty weapon once in a while. Like in my current situation. It was an awkward weapon. Really awkward. I spent a long time searching for a place to shoot from. I had to fly away from the crowd and try to track down my target among the groaning dead. I couldn't think of anything better than getting on top of a car. And why not? The normal deadies couldn't reach me there, and I could easily shoot at the freak until I got him. Or until my arrows ran out. And if nothing came of it, then to hell with him. Let him walk. Thwing! The first arrow hit him in the chest and turned to dust. The injury was nothing to the monster, which was too bad. He turned toward me immediately, bent down, and shot a thorn. Right then, I turned my ability on, and the bone weapon zipped through me, embedding itself into the concrete wall of the house behind me. How long would it take him to reload? Let's find out right now. Thwing! The next arrow didn't hit its target before the zombie's sniper returned fire. I went right back into the spirit world and stayed there until the deady forgot about my existence. Clearly, he could reload faster than me, so I wouldn't be able to rain arrows down upon him. But this time, I got him in the neck. I just had to shoot a little higher, and then it would all work out. For the next half an hour, I was in a hopeless position, taking shots and then immediately disappearing. But all for naught. This weapon was totally useless. I couldn't shoot with it, and the only way to kill deadies with it would be at point-blank range. Or at most, like 5 or 6 feet away. Ugh, fine, I said, pissed off, when an arrow hit him in the neck without even grazing the spine. Just a little more, and I would have succeeded. I had wasted so much time, and all for nothing. I had just 5 arrows left, and I was pretty sure that I wouldn't be able to hit the monster in the head while staying at a safe distance. But at that moment, the shooters stopped. I immediately floated up near him, trying to think of how I could beat him, so I needed to see everything in detail. He started looking around, searching for something, while his compatriots were just still lumbering ahead. After about 30 seconds, he turned back towards the tree that those guys were sitting on, bent down, and started shooting. "Ah!" shouted a man's voice, and with the sound of a branch cracking, he fell to the ground. Down came his hammer as well, hitting one of the deadies. The zombies immediately fell on their screaming prey and started tearing the poor bastard into pieces. It was weird, but the zombie's sniper was shooting blind. At least I couldn't see anyone from here, since the thick leaves did a great job of hiding everyone sitting in the tree from outside eyes. Or at least it was impossible to see them from the street. Having hit his first victim, he sniffed around and bent down. Thwack! With a hiss and pop, a new volley shot out of his neck. He peppered the top of the tree, but there were no sounds of pain this time. He missed, but only because the tree climbers had already started abandoning their hiding place as fast as they could. The first to land was Igor. He pointed his hands at the zombies crowding around the guy on the ground, closed his eyes, and in a moment they all flew away in different directions, as though an explosion had hit them. Some kind of telekinesis, it had to be. Now I got why they had wanted him to go first. It made perfect sense. One use of his ability, and he had opened up a path to victory. They just had to use this little opening and not waste time for no reason. "Oh, Jesus," I said, surprised when they grabbed their bitten-up friend and dragged him along with them. They would never get away from anybody like that, and they were just increasing the risk of being eaten. But that was their choice, not my problem. And my problems had taken care of themselves. All the deadies were running toward the tree, and the sniper, left all by himself, was starting to take aim at a new victim, snuffling his nose and darting his eyes over everything around. But his own companions were getting in the way, and he was not able to take a shot at the living. And he never would be. Fwunk! I couldn't miss at a distance of 5 feet away. The arrow pierced into his temple a good 4 inches, and the deadie fell over. But by then I had already faded into thin air, stretching my hand out to the blue reward that had fallen from the monster. "My precious," I whispered, when the blue sphere dropped into my inventory. What could it be? I was very curious. It was probably a legendary spear or a system machine gun, but it was definitely something valuable. But what it was exactly, that I would find out soon enough. In order to open up my prize as soon as possible, I floated upward and headed to the nearest building. Chapter 6. Firebomb, rare, 1/1. Description: 1 use. Activates when in contact with a solid surface. Creates a powerful explosion of flame in a 60-foot radius. Duration of fire: 1 minute. Well, there you go. I wanted a spear, and instead I got a Molotov cocktail. Thankfully, you didn't have to light anything, you just threw it, and it did everything by itself. The only thing that worried me now was how far I had to throw it. 60 feet was no joke. That was like 7 stories, give or take. Whatever. If I had to, I could throw it. In size and shape, it was pretty comfortable, similar to a glass ostrich egg. It weighed a pound, or thereabouts. There was nothing out of the ordinary about it. If you didn't know what kind of thing it was, you would never take a knick-knack like this for a weapon. After putting the egg into my inventory, I set about the not insignificant task of gathering my spoils. But before that, I head down the paths those guys had gone. They left some rewards there that I could pocket right away. There wasn't that much, mostly just gray potatoes, but it was still good. I mean, I could use them to force people to help me. Why not? Food was prime commodity now. The military would start killing deadies with their weapons, and there wouldn't be shit for rewards then. And then, to hold on to and clear out stores of provisions, it would take time and strength. And there was no guarantee that anybody could pull that off now. It was actually pretty interesting to follow behind those guys. At first, the concrete was marked with clear tracks of blood. That was where they were dragging the wounded guy. That lasted about 50 to 100 feet, and that was where most of the rewards were. They weren't getting distracted, just cutting a path through. I also found evidence of the abilities they had used. A wall of one of the houses was covered in soot, with some white gaps that looked like a person's silhouette. Someone had shot fire and burned the deadies. Their corpses were still lying there, all mangled up. I shouldn't forget that I am not invincible. My class certainly did let me get away with a lot, but any other asshole might have a way to get around it. Ah, you said it. Okay, the big guy's body was there too. Next to him was his hammer, which had been used to smash his head in. He had turned while his friends were dragging him, and he managed to bite someone. There were still more bloody tracks ahead. Dumbasses. They learned nothing from the first time and were now carrying another slow-acting bomb with them. But they might be able to defuse it. They could get a potion from one of those potatoes. I think the ones that come from the gray ones will save you from infection just fine. I had to stock up on them for sure. The bloody tracks deviated towards an entrance. The guys had run inside and slammed the door shut behind them. Thankfully, there was still electricity, so the magnetized metal door worked like it was supposed to. Probably one of them had a key. Since I would hardly find any more rewards farther along, I flew back to the children's playground. Last time I had just picked up arrows and left the rewards where they lay. Nobody was going to steal them anyway. Traveling through the streets right now was suicide. Everything was just as I left it. There was just one problem. Some of the rewards seemed to be buried under a pile of corpses. Damn it, I couldn't move them. Then I would have to reappear, and then the dead would attack me. But what if... I suddenly had a great idea. But to test it, I would have to increase my inventory space right away. Right now it was full of all sorts of crap, but only partially. I did have some useful stuff, like my sword, staff, shield, 2 bows, and some arrows. That was about 20 or 30 pounds, and I could use the rest however I wanted. I would need to find an easy zombie for experience, one who had recently turned from a child. I concentrated on the task at hand, pushing away my pity and sympathy. And there we go. The body, about 70 pounds, disappeared into my interior pocket. I wasn't about to try that with the ones who were wandering around and biting people, though. I was sure that the system would not allow that much weight. But sooner or later, I would literally be able to knock down my enemies with corpses. A little green potato was hidden under the kid, and I picked it up immediately, throwing the body a ways off. So, in total, I had more than 50 gray potatoes, 3 green ones, and about 20 item spheres. As for the little gray books, I had a fair amount of them too, about 30. But all of them, without exception, were useless. There were both active and passive skills among them. I could put enough points into them to make them effective, but I didn't want to waste any. In my case, haste would make waste. I was lucky to have gotten a class that let me wait without worry to find something more useful and fitting, and that was what I was going to do. But this stuff left a lot to be desired. I couldn't even get my hands on a pair of raggedy pants, to say nothing of a weapon. The couple of arrows and sword that was ready to crumble into dust at any moment didn't count. So what did that mean for me? I had to keep farming. Getting rewards. But before that, I needed to rest and recuperate, and also open up all my item spheres. From those 20, there had to be at least something. This time I got borscht for dinner. It came with a spoon, a piece of bread, and sour cream. And I must say that I really liked the dinner. Even though I used to sometimes just indulge myself with fast food, basically eating whatever, this fine, fatty borscht with fresh-baked bread was no joke. To save time, I started opening the spheres while I was still eating. Knife, 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 sledgehammer, knife. Damn it. Right now I have a pile of trash in front of me. Out of 22 sphere, I got only 5 useful things. The knives could go right in the trash. I wasn't planning to give them to anyone, and I certainly wasn't going to use that crap. But I did get a quiver with 20 normal arrows. They were new, sharp, and durable, and I would learn how to shoot them eventually. I also got a sword, just like the last one. Nothing special, just 3 feet of sharpened steel weighing 4 or 5 pounds. Not that sharp, but still. If you hit hard, you can still break a skull with it. And most importantly, one of the rewards was shorts, 10 out of 10. Normal-ass shorts. But they were not normal at all. You could tell right away that they had been sewn by one of the fanciest designers in modern Europe. My own underwear were twice as long as these shorts, and they were red too. But better than going commando all the time. It might be more convenient, I guess, but I still preferred not to. Ring of Force, 1/1. Description: single-use item. Upon activation, releases a directed wave of force. Effect distance, 5 feet. Okay, that makes sense. I think it is something like Igor's ability. I mean, the guy who tossed away a whole heap of deadies like magic. In some ways, it wasn't that useful, but then again, I wouldn't even have to leave my ghost state. Of course, it would only work once, but it still sounded pretty awesome. And the last sphere had a pendant raising my mana total by 10 points. But that was whatever to me now. It was recovering a little faster now, and I also had 6 stat points too. What did the last fight show me? That I didn't have enough to fight with those monsters functionally, and mow them down with my weapons? Yeah, no shit. And definitely not enough skills. But whatever. I don't have what I don't have. But I could go through my stats. Mana. I had a lot more of it now, but I still definitely didn't have enough. I mean, whenever I did quick or even sudden movements, I lost a ton of it. Right now, I could move about 150 feet in 1 second. But if I did that, it would be a huge expenditure. And then I would be at 0 and turn corporeal again. I put 3 points into mana right away and felt the same discomfort again. But you can handle anything when you're a ghost. I still had 3 points. I put 2 of them towards increasing my reaction stat, and then the last one into strength. Say what you like, but if you can even pull a bowstring without effort, you're not going to be fighting for long. After rematerializing, I dug out 20 of my gray potatoes. Buckwheat, potatoes, rice, water. Oh, hey, a potion. Mana potion, small. Description: restores 10 mana points instantaneously, and another 10 over the course of a minute. Also restores mental fortitude. 1 potion is equivalent to 8 hours of sleep. Health potions save you from physical fatigue, allowing you to restore your strength, while mana works on your mind. If you take 1 of each per day, then you don't have to sleep at all. But how many of these little potatoes would I have to dig through? In the end, I managed to get 3 potions total from 20 potatoes. 2 small health potions and 1 mana potion. I took care of all that stuff, then looked through the pile of junk on the table, digging around and putting a couple of articles of clothing into my inventory. I already had some like them on me, but it was no skin off my back. They could come in handy anyway. I also found another ring in the rewards, one that gave a bonus to Constitution. It wasn't heavy, so it could go on my little finger. I would replace it with something more useful later. The underwear fit like a glove, but I immediately covered them up with a coat so as not to embarrass my unsuspecting dead public with my fantastic look. And we're off. But I have no idea where we're flying to. It was awesome farming on the little mound, but still dangerous. Last time, one of those thorns could easily have hit me in the head, and then there would have been no potions that could have saved me. And it does no good to depend on luck. Sooner or later, that will screw you over. Who knows? Maybe I'll find something. I'll collect more rewards while I'm at it, too. Considering that my inventory wasn't going to increase on its own, I decided to head through shops and malls. And also, most importantly, I made it a priority to search the police station. That was definitely where the worst of all criminals might be hiding out, and not necessarily in the cells. There was one not too far from here. I headed toward it directly, deviating from my path only for dead zombies. Far from all of them would have rewards, but I still had to check. Hopping from point to point like that, I managed to add 5 potatoes and 1 sphere to my goods, although I checked nearly 100 deadies. The building itself was easy to find. It hadn't been there long, just since I was in college, but it was embedded in my memory nonetheless. It hadn't changed at all since then. The same tall fence with sharp stakes sticking up. You could definitely guess what was behind a fence like that. The police station was a 2-story building with barred windows. A great place to hide from the deadies. The doors there were serious, made of steel, and reinforced many decades ago. But the stairs that led to the entrance, on the other hand, were crumbling and would be very hard for the zombies to climb. The place was completely littered with corpses. Quite a lot, like a few hundred. But no matter how much I searched, I couldn't find a single reward. You could tell that the zombies had been killed with guns. There were people inside, a lot of them, but only 5 police officers. I couldn't tell if they had ammo or not, so I decided to observe them and make my own conclusions. I wasn't going to deal with regular people in this situation, but still, I wasn't a psycho. I knew that they were necessary somehow. That's just people. They would resume manufacturing, and then I would get the benefits of civilization back. And that way I wouldn't have to be in personal contact with them at all. "No, please don't!" screamed some guy piercingly. I immediately went over to the room the sound was coming from. "We have to, asshole." A fridge of a man, 6 foot square, waved his hand threateningly, and then punched the poor guy in the stomach. He looked like a stereotypical criminal, big, bald, and bad on his face. A boy, 20 or 25 years old, completely covered in blood, was sitting in a chair. His hands were tied behind him, and his legs were just tied together and fixed to the chair. "No, don't!" the victim shouted, even more shrill, barely coughing it out. Okay, I got it. The big guy was abusing the weak one. Why? Just because he could. Not once in all of history have people ever needed a reason to hurt others. I moved behind the big guy and took my sword out of my inventory. 1 hit to the neck should be enough. Or I could go from the front. He wouldn't be able to block it anyway. "Give us back our food, asshole!" shouted the big guy, hitting the skinny dude once more. "Those kids are about to starve!" Standing there with my sword raised, I suddenly froze. How quickly things can change. Now the big guy didn't seem like such a prick, and the little dude was a piece of shit. Stealing food from children? Probably not personally, but I was sure that they would starve because of it sooner or later. And he could easily pick off a couple of deadies and get at least 1 potato from them. But I decided to wait and watch a little longer. You never knew. But I didn't find out anything particularly interesting. The guy had been in jail when the apocalypse started. That was why he hadn't personally even been outside yet. I mean, that was true for everyone here. For them to go outside, the guard would have to press a button, or a worker would have to put a special card on the thing. But there weren't any people like that here. All they could do now was try to break through the doors to get them out. Out of the hundreds of people there, only 20 had survived. When the slaughter started inside, only a few police officers could get their bearings in time to be able to take out the deadies before they ate all the survivors. "You're not being fair, boss," the convict said weakly, drawing me out of my reverie. Or were you only a convict after a trial? Anyway, it didn't matter to me. Judging by his behavior, he was definitely no saint. "Give us back our food, prick!" yelled the big guy once more, but he didn't start hitting him. It seemed like he was afraid of finishing him off accidentally. "How much did he take, then?" I asked calmly, having materialized in the corner, as far from the brute as possible. "5 potatoes!" he shouted, waving his arms in my direction, then paused for a second, staring at me in surprise. "Who are you?" "5 potatoes. All right." I faded away, and before the brute could come to his senses, appeared by the criminal. Thwack! Inventory increased plus 10 pounds. A little wave of my hand, and problem solved. Plus 10 pounds. I just came back to land the hit and throw 6 potatoes on the ground. One for them dragging the body somewhere else. All work should be paid for. The big guy was once again taken aback, but in half a second he started shouting. He ran all over the room, grasping at the air with his hands, believing I was just invisible. I had to hang around in the air for a few minutes, watching him dancing around. And then, when he finally calmed down, I appeared again. "Chill out. I left you some potatoes." "They're on the floor over there," I said, standing in the corner of the room across from him. "And who are you, dickhead?" he shouted again, but not so loud this time. "Carlson, dumbass. You know where he lives?" "Where?" he asked, frowning. "On the roof. Shame on you for not knowing." I shook my head. Are there any more assholes like that one? I can pay 5 potatoes for each of them." "Huh?" He couldn't believe his own ears at first, but I didn't have to repeat it. After a second, the wheels started spinning in his head, and I could see him struggle. Clearly, there were some more assholes. He just couldn't simply take them out and hand them over. Too bad. "As you like. A piece of advice, just 'cause you're kind of funny. Only kill deadies with system weapons. Otherwise, you just get experience. What's your level?" 10, he murmured, lost in thought. "And I knew that already, even without your stupid..." And now he's all offended. I dematerialized and spent some time observing life in the prison. A lot of people were still in shock. Some of them were trying, unsuccessfully, to call their relatives, while others were just curled up in a corner staring blankly off into space. But not all of them. At least 3 guys and 1 girl were studying the system thoroughly, going through all the new menus, working out how to use their abilities. I was even almost knocked over when I came into one room. A whirlwind had passed through me, one made by a boy about 20 years old. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, then, raising up his hand again, casted forth the spell. The furniture in his room was quite messed up, and I really hoped nobody would give him shit for that. Working out even magical abilities was really important. That way a fighter wouldn't be dithering, thinking it out during intense situations, but would instead do everything almost as if by instinct. Some other people were looking through their rewards, practicing getting weapons out of their inventory quickly, and occasionally getting into conversations about stats and other new features of this world. I would come back here, but later. I'm pretty sure that once they run out of those potatoes, that guy will give up all of those assholes. And my inventory is already full. I didn't need potatoes anyway. Basically, they were worthless. But when it came to the green ones, oh yeah, that was where the delicious stuff was hiding. So what would be in the blue ones? I was sure it would be something heavenly. And the purple ones? I was afraid to even imagine it. But I definitely wanted to try them. Most probably, it would be either a full-course meal or a glass of some of the strong stuff. But I didn't manage to fly far. As soon as I made it through the neighboring building, a massive message appeared in front of my face, obscuring my whole vision. And no matter how hard I tried to get away from it, it just wouldn't leave me alone. Would you like to engage in a personal test, duel? Rewards, variable penalty, none. Yes/no.
Chapter 7.
Ha! Of course, yes. Who was I to refuse the system's gifts? A man in red underwear and a brown coat, that's who. If the conditions of the test had been something other than a duel, like a job interview or a personal meeting with a client, then I would definitely have refused, no matter what the penalty or punishment might have been. When I was younger, I somehow got a job as a mascot. I was in a zebra costume going around distributing advertising, and I was so sure that I just had to get through, that nobody could get to me in my costume. Just sitting around alone and giving papers away with my hooves. Yeah, that's not what happened. People began to approach me, hugging me, taking pictures of me. Basically, the workday lasted about 10 minutes. Then the pissed-off zebra stomped some guy in the face with his hoof and went and quit. But a duel? That was something else entirely. Yes, I was pulled out of reality with no warning. There were a couple of seconds of darkness, and then I was standing in the middle of an endless field. Knee-high, pale yellow grass, a blue sky, and, well, jack shit. The landscape stretched out as far as the eye could see. A figure appeared in front of me, about 100 yards away. A person. He was dressed in some kind of beige light armor, most probably from the system. He held a submachine gun in his hands, and hand already started aiming it at me. What? I realized that I could see my hands. You son of a... I didn't finish my sentence before I dissolved into thin air, hanging about 5 feet above the ground. The system had shut my ability off, nearly throwing me right into harm's way. At the edges of my hearing, I could hear a short burst, and then a few bullets whizzed by the spot I was just at. Well, it looked like you could take non-system weapons here. He had probably brought it in his inventory, and the guy was ready to kill, or rather, even wanted to. He had definitely opened fire on me, but I certainly had no intention of making it easy for him. While the guy was looking around, I calmly floated over to him. No point in wasting mana, since he wasn't going anywhere anyway. I stopped right behind him, raised my hand, and materialized right before landing a fatal hit.
Puta!
He yelled, and jumped quickly forward, right before the hit landed. The sword whooshed ineffectively through the air, and a second later, another round of bullets passed through me. He was fast, the prick. Almost like he had felt that I was just about to cut him down, although it seemed to me that he felt absolutely everything. But whatever, he couldn't jump around forever. Again, I found myself behind him, again with my arm raised to strike. And once more, he avoided it at the very last moment. Was this some sort of passive ability, or his class? Probably the latter. I began shaking just a little. This Italian, or wherever he was from, was beginning to piss me off. And while he was still alive, I would never be able to avoid his company. And he was saying something which was making me even more annoyed. "You don't have to talk to me, Scarecrow." I couldn't stop myself from yelling after another one of his dodges. In response, he just smiled and loosed a couple more bullets at me. He must have figured out by now that his shots were doing nothing to me. I decided to lead him a bit on the next hit. I squatted down a little, then smacked him on the legs, thinking he would do another somersault. But no, he just jumped toward me, punching me in the neck on the way. Oh, that hurt. But he didn't manage to shoot me, since I dissolved into thin air right after the hit, of course. Dodge this, asshole. I put my fist in front of me, aiming it right at the prick's chest. I activated my ring almost instantly, shooting out a powerful shockwave. The sky's the limit.
Have you ever heard that before?
The ring crumbled into dust, having fulfilled its one and only function to the fullest extent. The guy was thrown back at least 30 feet, He hadn't even been able to consider dodging the effect of the ring because I hadn't even had to materialize. Everything was done with my class abilities still on. And it was a strong hit. The soldier had dropped his gun and broken a bunch of bones. Now he was lying on the ground, gulping air into his mouth. I immediately flew up to him, then paused for a second with my sword raised. Up until now, I had killed obvious assholes, and I wasn't too happy even about that. But who was this guy? Maybe he had just wanted to get some food for his family, or a weapon to defend them. But he was the one who came here to kill an opponent. The sword passed easily through his forehead, and the soldier breathed his last right then and there. I was once again taken to darkness, but not thrown back into reality right away. A message appeared before my eyes, saying that I had finished the test, and that I was awesome. Yeah, I know. Oh, now here was the good stuff. The reward. Choose your reward. Item, unique. Level up, +1 stat point. There it was. A pretty hard choice. I hadn't even seen a unique item yet. And the level up was also tempting. It was an easy way to get some experience. Yeah, I had used up my gray ring, but how many of those could I find? I think a lot. I would just have to fly around the city, picking up everything that was just lying around. I could get more bombs and rings and collect a big old pile of them. And the stat point wouldn't go amiss either. An extra point was always good, especially since earning them would get harder and harder with each level. Item, unique. This was really interesting. The rest I could find on my own, but to get something that nobody else had, that was really worth it. The choice was made, with no regrets. A little green ball appeared in my inventory, and I was back in the street, full of deadies, but still familiar. This time I was ready for my ability to be shut off, so my free fall lasted only a fraction of a second before I disappeared again, continuing my peaceful floating to my destination. Where was my destination anyway? And how much time had passed since I started that test? And where would this step take me? Kazakhstan? Mongolia? I am just terrible at geography, so I'm not even going to try to guess. It's just endless step. Judging from the position of the sun, I had spent either half an hour at the test or that +1 day. But definitely not a whole year, since nothing around me had really changed. The deadies were still wandering in search of survivors. There were hardly any screams today. Everyone who was yelling in fright yesterday had already died off. It was no good to draw unnecessary attention to yourself, because even if the zombies didn't eat you, other people would get you anyway. Almost certainly. My first priority was to open up my reward. I could go back to the police station. There were no zombies there, and the walls were pretty solid. But there were people, so forget that. Heights were my friend. It would be much safer on roofs or upper stories. I could go back to my room, but that was too far away. Plus, now I was a seasoned hobo. I could slip in wherever I wanted to. Why didn't I just go home? Because I didn't want to. My loud neighbors drove me crazy over there, and if they survived, I would just kill them immediately. My stuff? I wasn't that attached to it. If I needed something, I could just take it, no problem. Especially since only system things were worthwhile anymore. While I was wandering along the street, I picked up something like 10 potatoes and 2 gray balls. Sometimes I would go into houses, but I kept running into people there. In one room, there was a pair of people, and somewhere else they were sitting on the stairs in the entryway. In the attic of a 5-story building, there was a whole group of them. Those dumbasses had hung up a sheet that said that you could hide from the deadies there. Idiots. You couldn't hide from the monsters like that, which meant this group was destined for destruction. I decided to satisfy my curiosity and see what was going there. The place was actually pretty good. If it weren't for the stalagmites made of bird shit, you could call it a luxury apartment. It was warm, dry, and comfortable. And to get up there, you had to climb up a ladder from the last floor and squeeze yourself through a narrow hatch. The zombies couldn't do it, which meant you didn't have to be worried about them. There were about 100 people. All the same, dirty, hungry, and scared. There were a couple of fighters with system weapons, and one old guy with a double-barreled shotgun. I liked that last guy already. He was sitting in the corner, cursing out anyone who came close in the rudest, most vulgar way possible, no matter the gender, age, or religion. Just beautiful. But this wasn't right. 2 armed fighters for such a crowd? Or was everyone just crazy stupid and decided to give up the ghost? I got my answer fairly soon, right when I flew to the other side of the place. Real soldiers, not those 2 idiots, were engaged in thinning the zombie hordes. They were doing it as carefully and precisely as possible, so it was painfully slow. A couple dozen guys had clustered up in a few rooms and were catching deadies with a noose. They would throw it around their necks, pull it tight, and drag them into the room. That was because going outside meant losing at least one person. No matter what, at least someone would be bitten. But this way they would stay alive, without losing out on rewards. They had managed, so far as I could tell, to kill 5 deadies, and their 4 potatoes would not be enough for this whole crowd. Not like they could just pop over to the nearest shop and pick up supplies. It would do them good to clear out the contents of the rooms, especially the ones that stayed after the girls. Then they could save up a store for a half a year in advance. Seeing these new victims of the system suffering, I headed back to study the camp. The old man who I noticed earlier was still sitting at the entrance to the attic, spewing vitriol at everyone around. "You need a potato, Gramps?" I didn't hold back, appearing right beside him. "Fuck off!" he shouted, not surprised at all by my sudden appearance. Ha! He definitely deserved one. I dropped a green potato by his legs, but he didn't even move a muscle. I kept watching for 5 minutes, during which none of the locals made up their mind to come and take the potato. I wondered who would be brave enough to do it. Some guy, about 30 years old. "Fuck off!" shouted the old man again. "You too," answered the guy without a second's hesitation, then grabbed the potato, which immediately dissolved in his hands. He put it into his inventory. Smart. That way no one could take it. I had found a new hero to follow around in my curiosity. The guy was first level. That meant he had already managed to kill 1 deadie. And he had also figured out the interface, since he knew how to use the inventory. Oh, now he was hiding in the far corner to open up his potato. Good idea. I wouldn't think about eating in a crowd of hungry people, otherwise they might overwhelm you without a second thought. But it seemed like the food set wasn't for him. He wandered through the trash, bird shit, and small groups of people before dipping into a dark cranny. It was almost like a blanket fort, designed to hide from prying eyes. There he was met by a girl of about 10. "Bro!" she chirped. "Shh!" He put his finger on her lips and turned around. Nobody was behind him, besides me, of course, so he headed inside without worrying. I decided I would also see what was going on in there. The guy covered the entrance to the fort with a dirty rag and turned back to his sister. "Here, take this," he said, handing her the potato, which made her squeal with joy. "What do you think it will be? I would like a cake," she squeaked, opening the food set. Alas, there was no cake. But it was for the best, since the plate of hot rice with pieces of chicken and gravy would be much healthier. But the girl was happy about that, too. She squealed with excitement once more and fell to eating. But she didn't forget about her brother. She ate 2 spoonfuls, then started trying to get him to eat too. "No, you eat, dummy," he said, shushing her. You're the dummy. I'm not eating anything until you do. She frowned and started poking her brother in the face with a spoonful of rice. But their game didn't last long. The rag hiding them from the outside world was pulled aside, and the two armed men appeared outside of their little fort. "Why did you not give that food to our common kitchen?" yelled one of the men threateningly. "Give it back right away." "But I haven't eaten it all," the girl protested, "and my brother hasn't even tried it." The men didn't care about that at all. They rudely pushed the guy, who was standing in defense of his sister, out of the way, grabbing the bowl, and turned to leave. "We did tell you, you piece of crap, that food is for the finders first," one of the men spat out in parting. "You haven't found anything, dumbass." A knife flashed in the guy's hand, but he couldn't do anything. There were more men, and only 2 of those people. I just floated there watching. Those assholes just smiled and kept moving, already starting to dig in the plate of goodies as they went.
But so what? He himself had stolen the potato while everyone else was afraid of approaching the old man. Well, he hadn't stolen it, it was just lying on the ground, and the old man had nothing to do with it. He could have shot him if he really wanted it. Talking to people. Fine. "Hey, drunkies, aren't you feeling full with that rice?" I blocked their way, appearing out of thin air right in front of them. "You got a problem, Dick?" The former alcoholic was surprised. "We are protecting you here, and what are you doing? You don't respect that? Then I'll make you." What the shit are you talking about? "I do not respect that. You freaking idiots, especially with 2 of you, could be getting a sack of those potatoes." I took one of the green spheres out of my inventory. "In this thing I found beer yesterday." "Yeah, really. Hurry off to a store and grab stuff. There's still a ton of food there." "Hey, hand it over!" They had heard the word beer and completely lost their self-control. One of them threw the plate of food away and come up to me quickly, having taken an axe out of his inventory. "You better just give over." He didn't finish speaking since I disappeared. Ha! Just give it. I had even made an effort to try to talk first. Now it was going to be much worse. What I could tell was that all the people around us were just giving us a wide berth, little mice running to hide in their holes. But one thing was certain, which was that all the real soldiers were downstairs. Actually, none of this was my problem, like how everything was organized here and who was taking whose food. But that was my potato, and only I could decide what happened to it. Whack! The first one doubled over after a strong hit to the stomach. After those zombies, these guys at level 2 were nothing to me. Plus, I had put points in strength. His axe fell onto the floor, and I immediately put it in my inventory.
It was a system weapon, so it could definitely come in handy.
The other idiot didn't even know what happened. I dematerialized in front of him, appearing behind him in a second. There was nothing he could do, so I just kicked him in the ass as hard as I could. He also gasped and flew forward, slamming his body into his companion's. "I give!" he yelled, covering his face with his hands. Ha! Piss ants. Fake heroes who can only take candy from babies. I didn't pay them any more mind, turning back to the shocked guy. He had his knife out, protecting his sister with his own body. "Here." I threw a couple of potatoes at them. "Eat this." I had intended to disappear right after that and get back to my own stuff, but I stopped at the last second. "And take this." I got the bow out of my inventory, the one that was already pretty beaten up. I also got 10 arrows from my quiver. "I will lend it to you for 10 rewards per day." He nodded without saying anything and carefully took the weapon from me. I hoped he wouldn't get killed. That way, I would now have some passive income. I didn't know what he was going to do, but you couldn't argue with his determination. That was how it should be. I disappeared into the air, but I didn't fly off anywhere. I was wondering what would happen next. Would he increase his inventory size? I was very curious to see. I might not like people, but when I am a ghost, nobody can bother me. It's perfect. I could just float in the air and watch. It was like watching TV at home, totally alone on a comfortable couch. But here I just had total immersion. The guy took up the bow. Just in case, he notched an arrow, testing to see if he could pull the string. It was difficult, but he managed. Now, if he put some points in strength, he would be just fine. He took a look at the poor bastards who were just now starting to get up from the dirty, shit-covered floor. "Hey, don't do anything stupid." The one whose ass I kicked raised his hands. "We're on the same side." "Whatever." The guy let the string go slack and nodded to the guys that they should get out of there. And they immediately did so. Life returned to normal. Everyone crawled out of their hidey holes, and the attic was filled with chattering voices. Nobody was trying to get the potato now, since it had a solid, armed guard. "One for you and one for me," the girl said, restating her ultimatum, but I was already floating out to the roof by then. I would have to come back and see how he was doing with the bow later. How weird. After I got this ability, which let me avoid ever coming into contact with people, I started watching them and communicating with them more than ever. I have to quit that. Outside, I managed to get some more potatoes, a couple of spheres, and one gray book. And that was completely because I kept throwing my sword onto the heads of zombies. Why not? It was an easy way to get free rewards. I might be moving slowly, but I was getting something out of it. I was collecting a bunch of trash, but it didn't need anything, so I just let it be. And food sets, as far as I could tell, were in scarce supply. I could trade a lot for them. What's more, the store shelves were still overflowing with supplies. I dropped into one to take a look around. There, I filled my inventory to full with whatever I wanted. Then I kept moving, trying to find a nice hiding place for myself. Level up, +1. Huh. I flew into a cargo elevator out of curiosity and found a whole bunch of people there. But they were all zombies. 5 normal ones, and one skinny one that was really fast. I couldn't just move on. This would be a really easy way to get experience and rewards. I would just reappear on the elevator's roof, make a few holes going downward, and poke them with my sword. The only one I might have a hard time with was the skinny one, since he could easily jump up to the holes and could, in all likelihood, get to me with his sharp nails. When he was jumping, he cut himself on the blade, but did not die immediately. I had to do a controlled, final blow, and the system rewarded me handsomely for it with a green potato. And since I couldn't find any survivors around, that meant I would just stay right here. I went up to the 10th floor, then checked all the rooms around, staying in the nicest one. Phew. All I could do was sigh in relief. The green potato treated me to a juicy beef steak, which I tucked into like a starving beast, even though I hadn't really been that hungry before. After eating, I wanted to see what I had gotten from the test, but I couldn't stop until my plate was completely empty. Okay, done. Now we can open this up. I wiped my hands on my coat and got the ball out of my inventory. It was pretty strange. It was glowing with all the colors of the rainbow, as if to show that nobody could have any idea what was inside. Interesting. I don't like surprises, but what choice did I have? The system did, which meant we also had to be happy with its strange little gifts. Item: unique. Let's open it. Well, all right. This must mean the system has chosen me as its favorite. I examined the item that appeared in my hands when I activated the sphere and could not believe that this was really what it was. But the item was definitely unique. There was nothing else like it, and there wouldn't be any. But that was the question. Why? What was this for? What was the system trying to say with this? From the reward, I got a cogwheel? or whatever you would call it. A large, heavy, toothed ring, and the teeth went both inside and outside. And they were pretty sharp, so I couldn't hold it right or throw it either. Which meant it was not a ranged weapon. Or a weapon at all. What the hell? Before freaking out completely, I took a close look at this bullshit lying in front of me and took the trouble to carefully read the description. Kerda, unique. 1000 over 1000. Description. Recommended for classes that use telekinesis. Improved control while using telekinesis. Restoration of durability influenced by telekinesis. Okay, there it is. So unique items can still be used. You just have to find your own ones. So I have a new task ahead of me. I need to find a unique item that fits me, like a spirit sword, or a soul spear, ghost pants. But it would be no good to waste stuff. I took a case of beer out of my inventory and put the Kerda in its place. It weighed a fair amount, but, if nothing else, I might be able to exchange it for something useful. I just had to find a buyer. The sun was starting to set, but I was still full of energy. You could tell that I had drunk a medium health potion not too long ago. So there really was no point in sleeping or resting now. And if I felt like it, I could just open up 10 or so potatoes and drink a couple of bottles of that blue and red liquid. I didn't really get a new weapon. But I did have an axe. That would be the most convenient thing. You could chop wood, open up canned food, or break some skulls. You couldn't complain about its durability, and it looked way more comfortable and practical than a sword. It was weird that swords were so common to get from the rewards. Before leaving, I opened up all the spheres I had collected. I threw everything away except one item. Thief's Belt. Dexterity +1. Normal. Set. Thief's Clothing. 1 out of 7. Description. Additional skill with full set. Imperceptibility. Ah, imperceptibility. Now everything was crystal clear. I would be imperceptible in these unbelievably trashy clothes. Fine. I would just have to get the rest of the set. In any case, the belt was fairly comfortable. It fit nicely, and with it I could finally tie up my cloak in a way that nobody could see my red underwear. There was also a ring among that trash that caught my eye. It was normal and gray, but it gave you a boost to perception. That stat was also important. I couldn't ignore things like that. I put the ring on my index finger and checked how it looked. Yeah, I was like a gypsy, sure, with a whole 4 rings on my left hand. Thankfully, though, they could be easily hidden under a glove, and they didn't bother me at no issues. Speaking of stats, I'd gotten 2 points. I thought I should probably put both of them into reaction. Then I would bump up dexterity next time. Or strength. And it would be good to have a little more mana. I mean, it was pretty nice to be able to fly fast. I collected my things, turned into a ghost, and headed out in search of interesting enemies. It was pretty easy to kill normal deadies, but I only had a passing interest in their rewards. I still had a big old bomb in my inventory, which I thought would help me out quite a bit. All that was left was to find a good, interesting enemy. While flying, I decided to take a look at my stats. Name: Casp. Level: 7. Class: Ghost. Stats: Body: 13. Strength: 5. Dexterity: 5. Constitution: 3. Mind: 16. Intelligence: 5. Reaction: 8. Perception: 3. Spirit: 7. Repository: 6. Conduits: 1. Available stat points: 0. Skills: Active, Passive, Additional. Dematerialization, Class Skill. Available skill points: 14. Abilities: Inventory: 130 pounds. There it was. I had an assload of available skill points and nowhere to put them. My class skill leveled up along with me, so there was no point putting any in there. But as for abilities, that was a whole nother story. I was pretty sure that to get one of those, I would have to put in some hard work. Something like setting up traps around the whole city, or sitting down and manufacturing weapons. Then the system would see my efforts and give me a definite ability level, allowing me to become a craftsman. But I couldn't be sure. Okay, now I think I have to find some strong enemies in the mall. To level up, people need to either kill strong zombies or a bunch of weak ones, and I don't think there's any other way for them to increase their stats. Anyway, there had been a lot of people in the malls, so maybe some of them managed to level up a little before they got eaten. That was why I was sure there would be some strong enemies and monsters there. Yeah, I was right. In the closest mall, I did find a whole bunch of strong enemies, but unluckily for me, they were spread pretty evenly around a large area, and I only had 60 feet. I mean, the instructions did say that was the radius, so it was really 120 in total. I needed some kind of lure. It wouldn't be enough to just scream and disappear. I had to make some noise for a while, until enough of those strong enemies came running. The mall itself wasn't that big, but it was tall. 5 stories plus parking. The zombies were mainly on the upper floors, but there was a fair number below, too. First off, I checked how things were in the restrooms. Nope, no good. The deadies were in there, too, and they were all torn up. People had hidden there, trying to block themselves off and help their friends, which put them in the worst possible position. The uppermost floor was the tallest. That was because that's where the movie theater is. I think I can work with that. I started by clearing out all the entrances and exits. The axe really was a very comfortable tool for cracking skulls. I didn't even hide after every hit anymore, and every time I appeared I could take out multiple deadies at one time. The only drawback was that it got stuck in their heads fairly often, and I couldn't always get it out in time. But when that happened, I would just go off to the spirit world, and my weapon would come loose on its own. Damn it. I couldn't in time. There turned out to be people in the room I wanted to use. 2 girls were hiding in the projector area. The door was pretty solid, which was why their few former colleagues couldn't get to them. What I wanted to do was put on a movie, and when enough zombies broke in, I would blow them all the hell up. Ideally with the door locked from the outside. Even if I set it off 1 floor below, they would still be burned alive here. I mean, I don't care much about society, but there was no point in killing 2 idiots like this. I had to put them somewhere else. "Can you fight?" I asked, appearing out of thin air, and received so much screaming in response that I had to disappear again. Ah, yeah. With shrieking like that, I won't even have to turn the movie on. "Please shut up." I had showed up again right when they were starting to get quiet. "All the zombies are going to be coming here now." Ah! Jesus, what did they want? What the hell were they screaming for? I faded away again and headed to the other side of the door. The deadies were started to beat on it in a frenzy, but for now there were only a few. They couldn't get through. For now. So they didn't make too much noise. I appeared behind them and started knocking them down one by one, seating my axe in the back of their necks, and then immediately disappearing. The rest of them didn't even get around to turning back since they were so distracted by the noise. So I easily took out 15 monsters in just a couple of minutes. Scream again and I will leave. Do what you think is right. My voice was calm, but strict. I may not like dealing with people, but girls were an exception. Sometimes. "Who are you?" one of them squeaked out in fright. She was a small blonde, wearing a short black skirt and a white shirt. She and her friend were cowering in the far corner and looking at me in undisguised terror. But why? What was I doing to make them so scared of me? Maybe it was about my appearance. I had just looked in a mirror for the first time in a few days, maybe even a week. Kind of weird that there was one in such a small room. When you live alone and you only talk to people by text, you don't really pay attention to your appearance. I was a little scruffy. I had something between stubble and a beard on my face, and my unwashed hair was poking out under my hat in tufts. My clothes were nothing special either, just a trashy robe down to the floor, with leather greaves and gloves above it. And in my hands I had an axe covered in rotten brains. I'm Santa. What else was I going to tell them? It was the first thing that came to my mind. The girls froze, staring at me in disbelief. It was so intense that I had to disappear again. Well, shit, maybe I should just get out of here? You still here? Called out the blonde girl after a minute, when I was already heading to the exit. Yeah, I answered, appearing in front of them again. If you calm down, then we can get out of here.
But how? Those terrible monsters are everywhere out there, complained the other one. A redhead. Nobody special. Slightly taller than her friend, with more modest clothes, but she still drew the eye without trying. But nothing. Turn on a scary film, very loud, and show me where there's an emergency exit around here, a fire escape or something like that. The plan was simple. I wasn't sure it would work, but I was happy with the simplicity. I wouldn't get it messed up, and neither would these two cute ditzes. Which one should I play? What? I said, surprised. Which movie should I play? The redhead asked hesitantly. Was she being serious? Yeah, she was, looking at me with her innocent eyes, waiting for my response. Play something about zombies, I don't know. A trailer for some other movies came up on the screen, and the speakers blared as loud as they could. Before that, I checked to make sure the path of retreat they wrote down for me was clear. Everything was fine, except that the fire escape door was locked. I had to work on it with the axe, but the lock came undone after 2 or 3 hits. As soon as the sound started, hordes of monsters started crawling out of the woodwork. All kinds of zombies tried to get to the speakers first, while some of them started tearing at the screen. Zombies were coming out of the fire escape, too, but the stream of them ended quickly, and that was when we made a break for it. I shouted to the girls not to stop, to run as fast as they could, then activated my ability and rushed off. That was because I could hear the growling and groaning of deadies somewhere down below. We quickly came across the source of the noise. A dozen zombies were coming up the stairs toward us. I felt like instinctually passing through the crowd, but then I remembered the girls. Hadn't I decided to save them? You off-brand white knight. What did go to them for? You should have just flown off to the next mall or pretended that you didn't see them. But I had taken it upon me, and I had to save them. Plus, I wasn't really risking anything. I had potions, so bites weren't scary anymore. And if they died, well, I did all I could. I materialized on the stairs, got my shield out of my inventory, and gripped my axe tightly. The zombies were no good with steps, so they moved extremely slowly. They constantly stumbled and fell, and also got in each other's ways constantly. But even so, they were a formidable wave. I knocked down the first one without a problem. He then stumbled, so I just chopped him in the neck. The next one also fumbled, but still tried to reach me with his teeth, so I gave him a taste of my shield in his face. There was a ton of zombies, but it wasn't my first rodeo. As soon as a zombie's head flew back after being hit, I would sink my axe into their forehead, then I would have to disappear for a moment to get my stuck weapon back. After a couple of minutes, the stairs were covered with a thick blanket of dead zombies. After each hit, I would take a step back so I didn't trip over the bodies, while the zombies had the opposite problem, tripping each other up more and more with each step. "Ah!" shouted the girls together when they saw the heap of corpses. "Stop shouting, if you want to live." I was already tired of them, to be honest. I didn't have to fear the dead, but rather the living. I made it down to the first floor and looked outside. Across the street, about 50 feet away, was a small general store. The inside was empty and the doors were wide open, so I could unload the girls there and forget about them like a bad dream. "Hey." I turned to them and gestured them over. "Get to that door over there. I'll distract the deadies while you do." This time they didn't argue, they just nodded in agreement. Much better. There was a small group of zombies a bit away, and everything went well. The girls would be able to run to the door and close it from inside with no problems. "Okay, go. Close the door behind you and everything will be okay," I said, and disappeared. I was tired of watching out for them. Let them go somewhere else. I had already done far too much to soothe my conscience.
Now it was time to burn it all down and calmly collect my well-earned rewards. But I didn't start flying yet. I wanted to see how they would deal with their own problems. The blonde one went first, with the redhead jumping out the door after her. They didn't manage to make it. The blonde one was already right at the door when her friend got distracted by the zombies who were moaning and run towards them. So she didn't notice the little curb. What else could you expect? The blonde one didn't even wait for her friend, slamming the door shut behind her as soon as she got into the building. What a great friend you have. I squatted down next to the redhead girl, splayed out on the ground. What are you going to do now? She looked around in disbelief, then at me with hope in her eyes. You? Oh, screw you guys. I took this upon myself. I had to see it to its stupid conclusion. The blonde one was just standing by the door, so I had to grab her by the hair and throw her back. I flipped the lock, opening the door and letting the redhead inside. Done. You guys deal with your own business, I yelled, and disappeared. And now I had wasted too much time. The zombies, who had already started attacking the door, wouldn't reach them. If they did, the girls would deal with it themselves. As for me, I headed right back to the movie theater. In that time, a fair number of monsters of all shapes and sizes had gathered there. Now, with the screen torn into pieces and most of the speakers smashed to junk, the deadies had started slowly wandering off in search of something to eat. But it was still pretty good. There were at least 2 strong ones right in the middle of the hall, and another 10 that were a little weaker around them. A shooter, a big guy, and a couple of runners. And there was also some kind of weird, pimply, fat one. I hadn't run into any of them yet. He was only a little taller than average, but very fat. The mutant's whole body was covered in blisters from which wafted out some green vapor. That vapor was causing the walls to melt, and I didn't want to come into contact with it at all, not even with my ability on. What was strange was that no matter how many mutants I saw, they were all different. They weren't just copies of each other. Same with the shooters and the runners. Even the big guys were truly different from each other somehow. Take the shooters. The one that I killed earlier shot his bone thorns from his neck. Now I see 2 others, one of which has a longer barrel situated a little higher, while the other one just has rifles in his hands. It was the same with the big guys. The only thing they had in common was their size. As for the rest, some of them had bony protection, some were just oppressively massive, and there were even ones with huge maws and elongated arms. As for how to classify the fat ass, I had no idea. I had never seen one like it before. Ah, he was running away. I appeared, standing on a chair in the very last row. The grenade was already in my hand, so I just waved it through the air, lobbing it as far as I could. As it was flying, I activated my ability, and within a second I was hanging in the air outside of the building with a nearly empty mana bar. Boom! The explosion blew out the windows all at the same time. Level up +1. That's what I needed. Zombies from all around could hear the sound and headed straight towards the inferno. Level up +1. Inventory increased +10. Ah, not great. But I couldn't physically check every nook and corner. It was hot inside. The fire had not just gone the promised 60 feet, but had spread in literally a couple of minutes to the neighboring halls. I should have put films on in there too, you know. I could have gotten a bigger harvest. But this was still awesome. 2 levels. I should be at like level 9. Just a bit more and I could learn 2 additional skills. But it was at this point that level growth stopped. I think that level 10 is a limit that is not easy to reach. Even that brute in the police station, who had all sorts of opportunities to gain experience, didn't have enough for 10. Most probably he was still going around like a bitch at level 9. It took a couple hours to fly all through it. I even pounded a mana potion so I wouldn't feel sleepy. I had a lot of work ahead of me.
I needed to collect the rewards, finish off the injured, and then, last but not least, start unpacking all my riches. Thankfully, there were secluded corners everywhere. Even better now when explosions were going off and half the city was being drawn here. At the same time, I was watching how the girls I had saved were doing. They were sitting in opposite corners and not talking, just looking at each other angrily. No matter. Time would take care of their friendship, and only one of them would come out of that room. I don't like traitors, so I hoped that it would be the redhead. But by all the laws of nature, it would be the blonde one who won. It's always those assholes who are ready to trample on others, to throw those around them under the bus at the first opportunity, who seem to succeed most often in life. The flames eventually died down. Unfortunately, the fire never made it to the lower floors, so I could have leveled up a couple more times. But still, I managed to take out a significant number. The first order of business was to get the rewards left on the fire escape. They were all gray without exception, but still, it was food.
Then I went directly up to the epicenter itself. Now it was clear why the fire didn't spread to the other floors. Although the temperatures had been intense here, which was enough to light the neighboring halls on fire, the firefighting system had still worked right, which meant the rest of the building was now completely flooded with water. And even though the fire had gone out, I couldn't go up to where the explosion had been right away. It was too hot, and even my incorporeal body was starting to feel discomfort. I couldn't ignore that, so it was better to just wait. And also, I had a lot to pick up in the other rooms too. The deadies were charred there, but definitely not all dead, so a lot of them were weakened or even immobilized. I started appearing to give them quick but precise hits of my axe, killing them one after another. In total, after 1 hour, my inventory was full of about 70 potatoes, 30 spheres, and 10 useless gray books. 5 of the potatoes and just 1 sphere were green. 1 more hour passed, and I could finally get to the smoldering ruins. It had been a great hit. There weren't even traces left of the furniture, and even the concrete had melted. It was the same heat I had felt when I realized I would have to leave my house and go to the pay box. And then stand in line. There was a mountain of charred corpses right in the middle of the hall. I hadn't thrown the grenade that well, so it fell in a corner, meaning not all of the zombies had been turned to ash. But right away I saw a whole pile of rewards. They had fallen all over the place, and the flame hadn't damaged them at all. But I hadn't been worried about that at all. One after another, the rewards started dropping into my inventory. There were some green potatoes and spheres. Finally, I started digging around in the corpse pile since there might be something good under them. And almost right away, I found a blue potato. I would have to open it really soon since I was really curious what was inside. But there was nothing else interesting. Well, it is what it is. I materialized next to the pile of corpses. There wasn't a single zombie around anyway, so I didn't have to worry that someone would attack me. The charred bones flew away with a crack as soon as I hit them with my axe. Underneath them, I found another potato and a green book. There was a whole treasure trove here. After finding that, I started digging deeper and deeper into this vein, throwing away bones all over and pulling out more and more rewards. Rah! The pile exploded, throwing me backward and raining charred body parts on me. The last survivor appeared in the middle. It was the Blob, covered in his green blisters. He looked at me unerringly, and right then his blisters exploded, filling the entire room with acrid green smoke. The mist spread like lightning through the whole room, and I only managed to dematerialize at the very last moment. But it didn't matter. The mist was magical, of course, damaging me no matter whether I had a body or not. Chapter 9.
This poison is shit! And it was strong. The mist spread throughout the room in mere seconds, and I felt bad almost immediately. I immediately shot out of the hall and flew until I found fresh air, but even in that short time I took a fair amount of damage. This bullshit magic got you right down to the bones, and there was no protection from it. But I wasn't going to leave that fat beast without a fight. The mist would dissipate eventually, and then I would go back. But for now, he could wait. He had nowhere else to go, and if he tried to leave, I would definitely not leave him in peace. I mean, his magic would be a lot weaker outside anyway. Once I was out of the building, I immediately headed for the nearest multiple-story building. Slowly but surely, I climbed to the top floor, where I easily found a comfortable hiding place. I didn't worry about searching the surrounding rooms, since if there was any danger, I could just disappear, at least. And at most, I would become the danger. So why did I need shelter? Comfort, nothing more. The wise old drunks outside would certainly argue with me, but mixing was actually a great thing, especially when what you are mixing is health and mana potions. This was like secret sauce, right on the edge of perfection. I appeared in the room like a sack of potatoes. I just fell down and lay there. I had neither the strength nor the desire to move. I felt like I had been burned out from the inside. But that cocktail brought me back to myself in a few minutes. Along with my physical health, my health and mana bars climbed back up, although their growth slowed down every passing second. "You acidic bastard!" I shouted, as soon as I had the strength for it. My mind was working twice as fast, spurred on by hatred. And it wouldn't calm down until that beast had given me at least a blue reward. And even though that fat son of a bitch may well be recovering his health while I'm resting here, I won't be wasting my time needlessly. I had more than enough spheres, but the gray ones didn't interest me at all. I had a few green ones and one blue one, as well as one blue potato. And a green book. Airblade, uncommon. Description: allows the user to create and direct a blade of air. Low puncture ability, damage varied. Dependent on the level of the ability, the size of the blade, the amount of mana used, and the stats of the user, and also on the skill of the ability user. The system always forgot to mention the most important thing. I don't think things will be that easy with this blade. It was a cool skill, but I'm not going to learn it, sorry. Yeah, it would be awesome to shoot out compressed air that sliced up everyone in its path. But first off, this was only a green book, and I only cared about blue ones. And secondly, the skill was designed for picking off weaklings. And from weaklings I would get neither experience nor good rewards. Sure, I could get a whole wagon load of potatoes, but what good would that do me? So no, thank you. I will just keep flying for now. The book went back into my inventory, and a blue potato took its place. Without a second thought, I immediately opened it, and suddenly had a full-course meal in front of me. On top of that, all of the food was beautifully plated. There was a clean tablecloth on the table, and all of it gave you the impression that you had ended up in some sort of fancy restaurant. This time, the system decided to treat me to Italian food. In general, I really love it. All the pastas, risottos, and all that stuff. And the system really knows how to cook. I have never had such delicious food before. But what about food set? Rare. Description: when eaten, there is a chance for a 50% increase in a random stat. I almost choked on my food when I read that. I had literally just been thinking that I couldn't find stat points anywhere, and that they were the most valuable resources in this new world. And now look what shows up. I was once again convinced that I should focus on killing only the strongest monsters. I had almost licked the plates clean. I was hoping that the more I ate, the more likely it would be, but in the end I got nothing except the satisfaction of eating a delicious meal. But I was happy that I didn't have to wash the dishes.
I wrapped the tablecloth up like a bag and threw it and everything in it under the table, then opened up a few spheres on top of it. 1 blue one and 2 green ones. I started with the simplest ones. Power hit brass knuckles, uncommon, 500 over 500, strength +2, power hit. Description: 10 over 10 mana. The accompanying ability allows you to significantly increase the power of a single hit. Cost 10 mana/durability. Recharges in 1 minute. Very interesting. But I didn't understand jack. Was this like that ring with the built-in skill? But that one was single use, and this one you could throw around as much as you like. Except you would have to keep pouring mana into it, otherwise the durability would go down too fast. Or would it restore itself automatically? The only way to find out for sure was to use it. In any case, it was a nice toy. It wouldn't help with the acid monster, but it would cause no trouble, so let it be. I would definitely smack someone with it eventually. Okay, what's next? Traveler's boots, uncommon, easy stride. Description: comfortable boots. The passive ability, Easy Stride, will keep your legs from getting tired when walking far. Honestly, if I can speak frankly, this is absolute shit. But still better than what I had. I don't like walking, and I have quit it completely, now and forever. But whatever. And to tell the truth, they were very comfortable shoes. They looked like normal, high leather boots, but in fact, I had never worn anything like them before. They fit perfectly, as if they had been made bespoke for my legs. They were even adapted to take the length of my nails into account. Amazing, but still useless for me. But if I was walking around a building, they would do nicely. And now, the cream of the crop, the blue sphere. Halberd of Cleaving, rare. Strength +5, Constitution +5, Cleaving. 1,000 over 1,000. Description: Mana store 50 over 50. Cleaving, active, directed ability. Upon activation, releases a blade in the direction of the swing. Distance, 15 feet. Cost in mana/durability, 10. Recharge time, 1 second. Oh, this would definitely go with my collection. Finally, goddammit, I had a spear. Even though this thing was officially called a halberd, but that made it even better. It was heavy, damn it. So you could straight away tell how dangerous this weapon was. For sure much more powerful than a knife tied to a stick. It was a good 5 feet long and weighed no less than 10 pounds. And most of that mass was at the very end, which was mostly metal, meaning even holding it in your hands was fairly hard. To say nothing of swinging it around. So that boost to strength from the weapon was really noticeable, handily making up for its weight. The handle was made of some kind of extremely solid, dark wood, and there were blue markings near the sharp end. They were some kind of whorls, and might even be letters. Something fantastical, like Elvish. Completely incomprehensible. Basically, it was a weapon without any excesses. If you ignored the blue markings, then the rest of it was made in an extremely minimalistic way. On one side you had the tip, an axe welded to a point, and the other side was just a spiked knob. That was all. No fancy bends or nothing like that. Just a weapon designed to kill. There was nothing else interesting. An hour had passed since I fled the movie theater. In that time, the acid should have dissipated 20 times over, so it was time to go back. On top of the fact that I just had to get my revenge on that fat mob, there were also a ton of spheres over there, and there definitely had to be some valuable ones among them. Either a blue sphere or a blue potato. But before returning to where the grenade went off, I hopped over to the girls. I didn't leave them there for nothing. I was curious to see how they would get by. What was interesting to me
was that I didn't enjoy being around people, but watching them from a distance was nice. I didn't feel any awkwardness like that. The redhead. Amazing, she did everything right. Of course, now I could not even imagine where she could have gotten off to. And here was female friendship for you. The only one left in the room was the blonde, with a knife in her eye. Honestly, I never thought the redhead could adapt to the realities of this new world so fast. But even though she acted surprisingly brutally, it was still fair. She had left the room and hidden God knows where. I wasn't going to follow her, although if I met her again, I would ask her to pay me back. I did save her life twice, after all. I went back to the movie theater and spent some time checking everything in detail. In the last hour, a lot could have changed here, like zombies coming or people running to the fire. But no, everything was just as empty and quiet as before. That fat ass was guarding the rewards scattered on the floor as if he were a dragon with a horde. He had clambered up onto a mountain of charred bodies, just waiting for someone to show up. Last time, the green blisters on his skin had been full to bursting, but now they had deflated somewhat. Had he used up his green junk and couldn't repeat the trick now? Or if he could, it wouldn't be as strong as last time.
After flying around the room a couple of times, I couldn't think of anything better than provoking the freak to attack from a distance. More than that, I would have to attack blindly. It was so dark you may as well poke your eyes out. As a ghost, that was no issue for me, but as soon as I materialized, I would have problems. That was why close quarters fighting was probably not going to succeed. I had to provoke an attack and then act accordingly. To do that, I had a bow and 10 arrow, but I wasn't fortunate enough to have the accuracy or the skill to pull it off with that weapon. Yeah, well, screw it. I flew into the room, found my target, and materialized. Without moving, I took the bow and the arrows out of my inventory. I pulled the string, paused a second, breathed out, then loosed the arrow. It flew wide. I missed hitting his head by about a yard. Sheesh, I should have come a little closer. Grah! The monster roared, stretched out, and began shooting out puffs of green smoke again. The deadly gas came closer and closer with every passing second, but before I disappeared, I got off one more shot. This time the bastard clocked my location exactly, and roaring once more, rushed right at me. Everything the monster ran into along the way crushed and thrown about every which way, so now was no time for waiting. Well, damn it, I had a different strategy. Only dumbasses fight head-to-head. This time I flew up a little higher. That would buy me some free time, and I would make good use of it. I sat down on the edge of the roof with my legs hanging over the edge, looking out over the cities sprawled out below me. The zombies were scurrying around like ants. They would go into the doors of shops and open apartment entrances. They were looking for something they could eat. But the people hadn't given up yet. Somewhere over the horizon I could hear shooting and even explosions, while a little closer, in one of the grocery stores, the people had built barricades and were now trying to fight off a group of mutants. 2 big guys, a fast one, and some normal zombies. I think they'll be fine. Today, messages started showing up in windows, too. Most of them were asking for help, but you also encountered heroes who were offering to save anybody who needed it. As expected, people were settling in attics right now. That was because the main threat was all below. But I felt like that was just for now. Just let some flying monster show up, and that's it. Holiday over. You dumbasses, do something! Get levels and rewards, work together! There's enough food, weapons, and skill for everyone. But no, they're just going to sit and wait for the government to save them. But the government has been going around eating brains for a long time. Even before all of this started.
At least that's what it seems like to me sometimes. Boom! Son of a bitch. Still can't get no peace. They keep knocking and knocking at the door, even though I haven't been there for a long time. But whatever, that fat ass will shake them out. After about 10 minutes, the sounds died down below. Only after that did I head back calmly, checking how things were there. The fatso had managed to break through the door, and now he had stopped, realizing that nobody was in the room. He had barely managed to get in himself, which was all the better for me. Thwack! The halberd easily pierced his soft flesh. After scoring the hit, I immediately disappeared into thin air and flew a few feet back. The acid zombie roared and turned around, sniffing and glancing around with his empty eyes. Not finding the offender, he opened his massive maw and began spraying green liquid from it. I was getting out of the way anyway, since those drops were already fizzing and eating right through the metal and concrete.
Fuck you, asshole! But after vomiting, his blisters completely deflated. He even shrank himself. But what was really interesting was that the wound on his back healed up in just a few seconds. Okay, what would it say if I looked at him? Acid zombie, level 9, health 100%. What a monster! He was really recovering right in front of my eyes. Swip! I had appeared behind him again, slicing him in the neck. The point, judging by the sound, slid past his spine and embedded itself in the beast's meaty neck. But this time I wasn't going to disappear immediately. I would be taking him on blind. The monster tried to turn around, but I was holding on the handle, stopping him from doing that. Son of a bitch, if I just had an attacking spell right now. But I still had one more trick up my sleeve. The beast began tossing himself around the tiny room, rushing backward to get the annoying insect off his back. Me, though, I was trying to hold him back, so I stuck the handle into the ground, holding onto it with my left hand as tight as I could. On my right hand, my brass knuckles were flashing. It was only in the pitch blackness that the barely visible light could shine. Same for the halberd. Specifically, it was the fancy patterns that were lit up on the weapon. Clearly, that was where the mana worked. Crack! I heard an unpleasant sound, and felt the beast rushing toward me. The piece of meat holding the halberd in had torn out, and now the acid shooter was being held back by nothing at all. But it was too late. A flash lit up the small room, hurting my eyes, and my brass knuckles made direct contact with the beast's chest, overgrown with blisters. I could hear the sudden crack of bones breaking, and the monster flew off right then. I grabbed my halberd easily and turned into a ghost, rushing after the injured monster. He ran into a concrete wall and fell onto the floor after losing his balance. Health, 72%. What is this? I hit him as hard as I could. Health, 75%. The zombie was starting to get up, but I wasn't about to take my time. I readjusted my halberd, then raised it over my head, bringing it down in a powerful, wide-sweeping slice. The blade passed into his flesh with a smacking sound. I was already ready to bring another blow within a second. I hit the body, still trying to rise over and over, but the zombie just wouldn't die. That was all due to the darkness all around. Stupidly, I still hadn't managed to hit him in the head since he was constantly moving. Any second he might spew again, and I would have a bad time with those burns no matter what, even if I managed to turn on my ability. I had to hurry. It was time to play another trump card. Cleave. This time I put my heart into it, but a second before that I turned on my class skills so I could aim better. There was a flash of light and the blade shot out a wave of energy. It sliced through the monster's body and hurried onward, knocking sprays of sparks out of the walls. My ears were ringing from the noise, but even after a hit like that, my enemy still wouldn't die. I had to do it again, not even aiming this time. A hit! Another hit! You tenacious monster! Level up +1. Phew!
I leaned against the wall, slumping my whole body. Grrr! That was the response from the deadies heading toward the sound. They had been hobbling up from the lower floors for a while, but I had no desire to deal with them in a close-quarters fight. Plus, I had already made sure my halberd worked in my ghost state. The world turned black and white as soon as I faded into the air. The zombies calmed down immediately, and I flew off to a wide hall. Now there were 50 deadies there, and no matter how little I felt like it, I still had to take care of them. I was here anyway. Plus, the gray rewards could also do me good, since I could get potions from those potatoes. Smack! A wave of energy rushed forward, sweeping down scattered rows of deadies as it went. But that didn't kill the zombies. I just kept learning more about how to use this weapon. So, I had cut 15 zombies in half, but to kill them, I would have to slice them down at head level. The mana in the halberd had run out, so I had to learn as I went. There were no instructions for this weapon, so I just had to hope the system would be too tricky about recharging it. I focused on the halberd and gave a mental command to transfer my own mana to it. But nothing happened, no matter how hard I tried. It's never that easy. The mana had to come back on its own, and you couldn't just transfer as much as you wanted. Really, why did you think that you could recharge a weapon? If that were true, you wouldn't need skills at all. You could just carry around and use whatever was in your inventory. I would use a bit of durability. I still had 1,000 left, which should last a long time. Smack! And one more small pile of deadies was left on the floor. This time I aimed right and cut down more monsters. I hit them right at the neckline. 2 more times and the room was much more empty. The only ones left were the chopped-off bits, and there was at least some light over there, so it would be no problem to deal with them. Anyway, I flew around a couple of times to make sure that there were basically no zombies left, then materialized right by the door. A couple of the injured ones stumped up to me, but I cut them down as soon as they got close. One precise hit to the face, and a regular zombie was right on the floor. But there was something strange. Obviously, the system calculated damage, increasing it for a hit to the head. I wasn't putting in any extra effort to break the thick bones of the head. Phew! I sighed in exhaustion again, having realized that there were no more survivors. I turned back into a ghost, put my weapon back into my inventory, and started flying from corpse to corpse to collect my hard-won loot. Okay, something was not great here. I didn't get something from each of them, far from it. Even the weak-ass gray potatoes were falling much less often than before. In total, from 50 monsters, I got 30 rewards, and all of them were gray. System. What is this robbery? Was this just because I had reached level 10? They weren't just cutting off my experience, but also this flow of freebies? Or maybe the rewards got less and less every day. It was like a starting bonus which had finished now. I wasn't even going to guess how much time had passed since the apocalypse started. It was definitely more than 24 hours, but these changes were only showing up now. Well, fine. There were more than enough rewards in the next room anyway. I moved over there and started digging through the mountain of corpses to get the treasures out. All in all, I only stopped looting after 2 hours. Some of the spheres were buried in ash, and some were buried under corpses, and every time I had to shut my ability off to collect them. But now I had stuff to open up and enjoy. 2 blue potatoes and 8 green ones. I also found a green book and a green sphere, plus another blue one. And that wasn't even taking the stuff I got before into account. I definitely felt now like the richest person on the planet, and it was very probable that I actually was. Plus, I had filled up my inventory with 189 gray potatoes, 47 items, and 56 books. I could deck out a small army. But I'm selfish. Why should I share with anyone, when they can easily get all this stuff themselves? I remembered that I was as tired as an ox who had been plowing for 2 months straight, so I head straight back to my new lair. I mean, where I had just been opening my rewards. While on my way, I considered my future plans. It was time to increase my inventory space.
Now I would soon be opening a huge mountain of gray balls. Would I have to throw all of that away? Yeah, probably. At least most of it. If I had an inventory of about a ton, then I wouldn't have this problem. So my next move was to find some bastard. I didn't think I would have a problem with that. Night was coming, and that was when the bad guys usually came out. Come here, sweetheart. A blue sphere appeared in my hand. I squeezed it in my fist, closed my eyes, and wished for an interesting and useful item to appear in its place. Chapter 10. Medium Bag X3, Rare. Description: allows you to carry items 3 times the allowed weight and size. That's all. Nothing special. Even a little insulting. A medium-sized bag did appear in my hands, the kind you could fit 2 packs of A4 paper into, or maybe 3, around there. But, knowing its properties, you could jam much more into it. Honestly, it was a useless item for me. In no time, my inventory would let me carry around whole cars in it. I thought it was probably intended for those who wouldn't kill people like them in large numbers. In that case, it would definitely make sense. You could put 30 bricks in it, and even that much you could reasonably carry around without breaking your back. Was it cool? Definitely. But right now it was going on to the trash heap in my inventory. My opinion about the reward had changed in 1 second. Now the bag was started to look much more attractive. I could jam it full to bursting, and only then throw it into my inventory. And thanks to it, I could put 3 times as much in. And that was really awesome. If I put all my stuff in bags like that, then instead of 140 pounds, I could hump around 420 pounds in total. I couldn't hold back and went over to the mirror. It would be a sin not to admire such a beauty one more time. Startled by my appearance, I took a minute to regain my composure. Yeah, I had let myself go a little. But whatever, it happens. Right now, I would take care of my immediate problems and fix my appearance. And now I was looking like a hobo, with my tufts of hair poking out under my dirty hat, my open trench coat, and my red undies. But I had to give the system its due. My body was clearly looking more ripped. My height had been a little more than average, but before I was much skinnier than normal. But now I was looking good. What do you know? He really is a hottie. And even his hobo look couldn't hide that natural beauty. I didn't feel like eating at all, but in theory it was necessary. Raising a random stat required huge sacrifices. But when would I get another blue potato? I had no idea. So I put the thought aside. The time would come. Now I could use my available stat points. No reason to let them go to waste. Even if I was already quite strong, there are no limits to perfection. Name: Casp. Level 10. Class: Ghost. Stats: Body 14. Strength 5. Dexterity 6. Constitution 3. Mind 18. Intelligence 5. Reaction 8. Perception 5. Spirit 10. Repository 8. Conduits 2. Available stat points 0. Skills: Active, Passive, Additional, Dematerialization, Class Skill. Available skill points 20. Abilities: Inventory 140 pounds. I think that will do it. I had gotten 6 points, so I put 3 into Spirit, 2 into Mind stats, and 1 into Body. I increased Perception and Conduits, the latter just for the future. I felt it in my gut that after level 10 they would be somewhat harder to get. And that was the smallest one, which meant you would get stat points wherever you could. So it was worth it to think of the future. I would be getting attacking abilities, and their damage would directly depend on those conduits. Better to have them than to get to level 100 without any at all.
Then I would still be running around in my red undies and attacking everyone one at a time with my halberd. After taking care of my stats, I decided to see what was in the green spheres. Then I would see what kind of book I got, and finally I would deal with the gray ones. I would throw away most of them, but I would have to get something worthwhile. I would be exceptionally happy with just these arrows. Or I could get a bag, or a single-use ring. All those things would come in handy eventually. And, well, I was yet to get something useless from a green one. Right now the rewards were making me smile. Flash grenade, uncom.
Description: blinds all creatures within a 10-foot radius for a short time. The length of time depends on numerous factors. On numerous factors. Thank you, dear system, for the clear instructions for this item. How would I ever get by without you, piece of shit? Okay, but here you can figure it out yourself. Most likely it will be worst for those who are looking at the grenade when it explodes, and for those who are closest to it. Or maybe not, who knows? Anyway, this item could only be used with only living things, real people. That was because the deadies didn't need eyes. They oriented themselves using some kind of dead senses. Next came the boring and monotonous task of opening all the pointless gray rewards. The mountain of trash stretched out across nearly the whole room, but the spheres still never ended. A knife, a shield, a knife, a sword. I was too greedy to leave it all, but I had not signed up for carrying all this shit around. It was better to take a couple of cases of beer out of my inventory. It would just be more useful. I had gotten them right out of the refrigerator, and they hadn't warmed up even a single degree after 24 hours in my inventory. Beautiful. The process went a lot better while drinking beer. Okay, knives, whatever. I could just throw them at the closet. Every third one stuck. Not bad. In the end, I had drunk a couple of bottles and got a few things. There were, as far as I remember, 47 spheres. Out of them, I managed to get 2 quivers of arrows, a new bow, and some regular clothing. I also changed my gloves. I used to have gloves of reaction, and now they had been reconfigured to gloves of dexterity. It was basically the same to me, but the new ones seemed to be a lot more comfortable. I finally managed to change my annoying leather vest for a regular t-shirt. It didn't give any stat boosts, but at least it was much more comfortable on my skin, and I wouldn't have to sweat and suffer anymore. I had protection on my fists, with the fingers cut out, so my hands wouldn't be too hot. I put the leather one in my inventory. It might come in handy. It didn't give any strength bonus, really, but it looked much cooler than either my coat or my robe. I didn't get pants, either. It was clear that these red underwear were just fate. And it was because of them that I couldn't wear the leather coat, which might protect me from scratches and bites. In addition to all that, I found another grenade among the gray rewards. But this was a normal one. If you threw it, it would explode and shrapnel would fly out 60 feet. It was made of metal and was very similar to our hand grenades. Repair kit, norm. Description: restores up to 50 points of weapon or equipment durability. Single use. That wasn't bad either. It looked like a normal whetstone, but actually it was really awesome. My halberd was never going to run out, especially if I could get a couple more of these. I got nothing else interesting. But I did get a nice emergency set of regular clothes. Gloves, leg and arm guards, and regular boots, just in case. All of my fingers were now decorated with a ring. I could have put on 2 of them, but it wouldn't give me any stat boosts. I just needed pants, and then I would have a full set. I did also get another interesting single-use ring. Ring of Featherfall, norm. 1/1. Description: single use. Upon activation, slows the speed of falling to a rate acceptable to your kind. I was already used to this. I wasn't even upset. The system just does weak descriptions, so let it. The important thing was that you could understand something, and that would be enough. Even the name would make it clear. If you were falling, you activated it, and you wouldn't die. Whatever a rate acceptable to your kind meant, I had no idea.
But if the system thought that was less than 60 miles per hour, well,